Hello, Spartans. My name is Dave Isbell, and I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Professional Enrichment in the MSU Alumni Association. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's presentation, Strategies for Working with Difficult Students. Before I introduce you to our presenter, I want to point out to you the chat window on the left side of your screen. This is where you can type your questions, which we'll be sure to answer by the end of the presentation. My assistant Kara is logged on as Helping Spartans. If you're having technical difficulties, please see the pod options at the top right corner of the chat box. From there, you can click on Start Chat with Hosts, and Kara will help you. For questions to the presenter, please sure to use the Everyone tab at the bottom left of your screen. Also, all of our webinars are recorded and can be found at www.spartanshelpingspartans.com. The chat conversation will be saved to the recording, and all of the live hyperlinks throughout the chat and presentation will remain live. At the end of the webinar, we invite you to continue the conversation on Twitter. We are at Helping Spartans, and the hashtag for this discussion will be Difficult Kids. For information about upcoming webinars, live streams, and other events, please visit us at alumni.msu.edu/lens. Now, it's my honor to introduce you to our presenter, Rosaline Kuiper. Rosaline graduated from MSU in 1998 with a BA in Special Education for Emotionally Impaired with minors in Psychology and English. Then again in 2008 with an MA in Rehabilitation Counseling. She has over 15 years of teaching experience, which includes experience running an alternative education classroom for suspended and expelled youth with disabilities in grades 4 through 12. She currently teaches an EI block for high school youth at Marvin E. Beekman Center in Lansing. Rosaline, thank you so much for being with us today, and I look forward to learning from you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I like this whole helping Spartans help each other. Since I have 2 degrees from MSU, it's nice to come back home here and connect with my other alumni. So I know Dave already told you that I've been a special ed teacher for 15 years. I have a lot of experience working with adjudicated youth and students that are on behavior plans. And I work a lot with the court system and with community mental health, as well as families and extended relatives. And most importantly, with the people in my building. I have been in some high priority schools. Those of you who are in education, you know what a high priority school means. It means you don't want to stay working there because it can be a pretty scary experience as you get under a microscope. Fortunately, that microscope really helped me to better my practice. And we had, when I was at Eastern High School, which has been a high priority school, we had several different coaches come in to work with the teachers and brought a lot of research-based practices into the classroom and into the building structure. And even though I've since left Eastern, a lot of the things that I learned in that intensive time has served me well. So I think the very first thing, let me go through kind of what I consider my main components of effectiveness. First and foremost is authentic relationships. I'm a counselor teacher. I have a counseling degree and I'm a teacher. I work with kids who have mental health issues, and I know that authentic relationships need to come first and foremost in anything, whether you're a business person or a classroom teacher, you need to be real. In addition, I'll go through a classroom charter, what daily circles can look like. PBIS, if you're not familiar, that stands for Culturally Responsive Positive Behavior and Intervention Strategies. Engaging lessons, restorative justice, and rapport. So what does an authentic relationship mean? I have been in a lot of in-services over the years. I just sat down with the Ingham Intermediate School District, and they were talking about students who do not feel connected to school typically report that they don't feel like anybody there cares about them. So the assumption is if you want a child to stay and learn, you have to show them that you care. When I was at the high school where I used to work, one of our visionary principals we had said each adult in this building will mentor a student. And we developed a huge spreadsheet of all the students in our school. And we had to make sure that, maybe as an adult I might be mentoring 5 that I'm just going to be checking in once a week with. That was crucial. And then when we know which ones are the most at risk, we make sure they have maybe one or two adult relationships to keep them feeling like somebody there cares about them. Whoops, let me go forward, not backwards. So, what is a classroom charter? Those people who are in the world of business, successful companies often create a charter, a vision statement, a set intention that everybody has agreed on. In a classroom, you need to take the student-led language and ideas, and you want to be addressing both the emotional space and the physical space so that you can come up with a culture for learning. A lot of my students come from a eye for an eye mentality, and you do me wrong, I'm going to do you wrong. So if we can establish the norm of our classroom right away, then that would be perfect. And the first day of school, you're gangbusters. I'm in there and I'm ready to make this classroom charter, and I've allotted my 30 minutes to discuss what our vision is going to be, and they don't all buy in. And I can't post it because not everybody's in agreement to what the language should be. And so I wait, and then the next day we revisit it, and we revisit in circle time, and I will tell you about that next. Basically, by the end of the first week of school, so 4 days in, I finally had a classroom charter that we could all believe in. So one of the things you'll see on this slide that you can access later is there's some Pinterest pictures of classroom charters. The classroom charter that my class came up with this year says, we will come together as family and resolve our conflicts, encourage each other in our learning, respect one another, and celebrate our successes. When I saw people having a conflict or being discouraging or not being respectful, I could immediately come back to this charter as one simple way to redirect all of us for a shared vision. And I just think when you have students know, oh yeah, well remember I said we should be like family, boom, they are owning that language and they've made it with you, and it's a point of pride in the classroom. I want my students to feel like family by the end of the year. Not all professionals want that. That's who I am. So I can only tell you what authentically works for me. And when I work with students that have emotional impairments, they need those types of family feeling connections. Some of the strong emotions that they're experiencing in their life require more nurturing than maybe just your typical student who just needs that academic rigor and they have everything else at home to really, make them a whole person. Another charter example for younger students, I like how they've done the red words that says we want to have friends, and then the blue words are kind of the students saying we promise to be kind to each other. We want to be able to play happily. We promise to listen and take turns. We want a lovely room to learn new things in, and we promise to look after our class and tidy up. So you can have language that's simple or language that's more complicated depending on the age level or the disability level. All of my students have different types of disabilities, so using some of the pictures can be really helpful. Daily circles. This is another thing that I got out of Eastern High School. They implemented this school-wide in our homeroom class. So even though I'm a teacher running an emotionally impaired block where I have 10 kids all day, yes, I use circles in that really unique setting. But even when I was back at Eastern High School, we used circles every day in our homeroom period. We had a 20-minute advisory period or a homeroom time. And during that, I would have all the students form in a circle, like you can see on the screen. And some days I might have a purposeful, like we're all going to set a personal goal this week. And then we're going to talk about that goal. Or we're all going to respond to a question. How I use it in my current job is that every student and staff participates. So we get in circle, and if I have my assistant there that day, if the social worker happens to be nearby, any staff that's working with the kids, if they're going to be in that room, they're going to sit in circle, and we're all equal participants. I begin each day in circle. I ask each student to check in with me, and that's just, how are you feeling today? Are you in a good mood, a bad mood? Do you feel like doing work? Is there a subject that excites you today? as they respond to that question first thing in the morning, I can quickly gauge in my mind who's already having a bad day, who needs to maybe go see a social worker or get a little one-on-one attention before I can even try anything academic with them. And then I will ask them to often set goals. And we will use circle time to talk about our goals, to have ownership and accountability over our goals. I focus more on behavior goals in circle. You know, a student might say that I'm going to mind my own business this week, or I'm going to refrain from yelling this week. All four of our classroom rules and our school rules at Beekman, where I'm at currently, are constantly talked about in my circle. I'm going to get into PBIS here in a moment, but when you explicitly teach what you want to see, the kids can know better how to please you. In Circle, I explicitly teach pro-social competencies. So these are two different resources that I really recommend. Goldstein's The Prepare Curriculum gives you step-by-step if you want to express your anger, if you need to introduce yourself, if you'd like to avoid conflict, if you want to pay someone a compliment. I will write down the steps on the board at the beginning of Circle, and I will take a student through. You would like to pay somebody a compliment. So the first thing is you need to identify what you'd like to say positive to them. Second thing, find a good time. Maybe impulse control is an issue for some of our students. And yeah, you want to tell them something nice, but maybe during math instruction isn't the right time. So we have to actually talk about these things and give them the tools to when is the right time to pay a compliment, and then how do you say it. And some of my kids, they don't receive compliments very well, and they're looking to say, well, what are you trying to get out of me? So I really, really recommend the Prepare Curriculum for high school kids. And they have these other books like the Anger Control Training book, which is ideal for a social worker or a teacher who can do a small group. And again, it explicitly teaches anger management strategies. So you're not trying to invent everything. It's already there for you. CRPBIS. This is a national trend right now. So if you're working in a school and you guys are not talking about positive behavior interventions and support, I would be very surprised. I just feel like this is rampant and it's almost the norm. In the Ingham Intermediate School District, we are now adding that CR, that culturally responsive side to our positive behavior and interventions and support. When I worked at Eastern High School, we were the refugee center of the Lansing area. So we would often have up to 52 languages spoken at the high school, and all these different cultures right there under one roof. I have to be cognizant that the home environments of a lot of my students are very different from the school environment I'm trying to have them acclimate to. And I have loved PBIS. At Beekman, we have 4 different behaviors, and they are be safe, be respectful, be responsible, and be your best. In my classroom, I have a positive behavior chart for each of my students, and I rate them on those 4 rules every day so that they can track where their behavior is. I have defined what being safe looks like, and it's not just keeping your hands and feet to yourself, but it's promoting anti-bullying behavior, and it's modeling that. So a kid can't get my highest ranking unless they're really being a good role model to others. Yeah, maybe they were safe and they didn't hit anybody today, but if you're still not being the role model and encouraging other people, you can't get a level 4, which is the highest. This triangle, I'm hoping, is familiar to folks. This is the PBIS tier system. The green part is tier level 1, and this is where you're going to capture 80% or more of your students. Good question, my little helping Spartan. How do you promote culturally responsive positive behaviors and diversity in the classroom? I think having some open-ended conversations with students can be the first piece. Identifying what our internal biases are regarding one another, and how maybe some of our stereotypes are inaccurate regarding one another, and allow those people in my classroom who come from unique cultural groups to explain their life. I had a Muslim young lady once, and we were reading a Native American creation story. And it was a very similar creation story to the Adam and Eve creation story. And she chimed in and she shared some of her faith's creationism. And it was an amazing dialogue in that moment to be really, culturally responsive to who she was, as I'm asking her to learn another story that was very much similar but not of the same religion. When you teach a literature class, you're going to always come up with Christian elements, and it was a good time for me to platform and say, all right, who is not Christian and wants to tell me something about that might help us think bigger. Some of my students come from a culture of poverty and a culture of violence, and so having open conversations with them too regarding the survival that they're facing versus this long-term goal setting of where I want to get them thinking. When they move sometimes 5 or 6 times in a school year, and they're not thinking about next year or 10 years from now. They're just thinking about who's going to feed me today and where am I going to get that. And so if I can show up every day and be consistent and make sure that they're fed, make sure that they're safe, make sure that they're emotionally and physically okay, we can begin to tease out those things that make us different and hopefully come up with a way that we can come together and get along. A word that I teach my students on day one is equitable. I will not treat you equal. I tell kids that every day. I will not treat you equal. I will treat you equitable. And what that means is if I have a student in a wheelchair, I'm not going to require them to run the relay race with us. That's like the most obvious example. But then if I have a kid with ADHD and he needs to stand up and walk around the back of the room a few times a day, that's what he needs. And I'm going to let him do that. But you who I know doesn't need that, you're not going to be out of your seat. You're not going to be moving. And is it fair? Yes. Yes, it is fair. It has nothing to do with you want to be treated the same. It has to do with what folks need. Working in the EI world, every one of my kids has a behavior plan. And you'll see that in these tier steps. When we're looking at the big group, we want to make those school-wide rules. Be safe, be responsible, be respectful, and be your best. All students, all staff, all settings. At Beekman, we explicitly teach, what does that look like in the cafeteria? What does that look like in the hallway, the gym, the playground? And of course, I failed to attach those lessons to this, but I'm going to make sure you have my email at the end. So if you want to see some sample lessons for how those things look in different areas, I would typically even have the students brainstorm. What does it mean to be safe on the playground? What does it mean to be safe on the bus? And once you get that language, you can develop behavior rubrics from it. You can use it as mini lessons once a week to refresh. Sometimes with younger students, you might have to go through tattling versus informing. I've done multiple lessons on that, helping kids know when do you need to get that a grown-up involved and when do you just resolve it yourself. When we get up to that yellow bar, that's 15% of our students, and that's almost where all of my kids start. My kids are already in the yellow, most of them are in the red. And those are the specialized group systems, like when I do my circle every morning and every afternoon. And then we can hopefully prevent worsening of those problem behaviors and give them the supports that they need. When I get up to my red kids, these are those discipline referrals daily, if not weekly. We're constantly tweaking. We're bringing in the social worker. I'm contacting CMH. I'm contacting family and getting consent forms if they have a church family. I have had a great deal of success connecting with church families and with coaches, because a lot of my students, they just don't want to do the academic piece, but yet they have an amazing spiritual side or they have an amazing athletic side. And so if I can somehow capture who they are outside of the school and develop a relationship with those people who are so important, I'm going to have a lot better chance of having them do what I want in school. Okay, and I'm reading my comment. Yes, and see, I completely agree. We are very Western focused, and Eastern High School again, woo woo Eastern High School, but they're an international baccalaureate school, and bringing in the world culture was just so much a part of my daily existence there. I certainly miss it at times, and if we're really going to make global citizens, we need to be culturally sensitive. So those three tiers, I just did a screenshot. There's this awesome website, the PBISworld.com. If you are not familiar with PBIS, or if you're looking for more supports in PBIS, this page just really showed what the tier one interventions are. And I think almost every teacher does this every day. Here we go. I'm going to call your parent. I'm going to reward you. I'm going to praise you. I use lots of proximity, ignoring. Those are your basic classroom management tools that everybody uses every day. Tier two starts to become more involved, and that's our check-in, check-out students and our behavior plan students. I had a young man who came from one of my high schools prior to coming to my classroom, and he already had a check-in, check-out. When he got to school, he needed to check in with the social worker, and she would kind of assess where his mental health was that day and if he was ready to attend class. A lot of my kids will come to school already upset about something that has happened the night before or that morning at home, and I cannot realistically expect them to start a lesson if they are cursing and perseverating about a perceived slight in the community. I've got to attack that, and I need to know who my people are. When you get up to this tier three and you've got students that really need a lot more support, I've lost plenty of teaching time because I've had to remove a student, deal with a student, just stop teaching completely and deal with a interpersonal relationship gone awry. And when I've done that for 15 minutes, say, okay, then we're going to deal with what you two are having happen right now and keep everybody in a respectful tone. It might take 15 minutes off my lesson, but in the end, the problem is squashed and the kids never had to leave the classroom, and we dealt with it as family, and now we're back into working. I think being a teacher requires more forgiveness than any other job you're going to have. With the kind of kids that I work with, I am routinely told to F off, or I get called horrible names. They'll find those exact things that are going to hurt my heart the most, and they'll say it to me. And I have to accept it and know it's not personal. No, it's a power of control. It's a manipulative thing because that's what they've seen. I have students whose guardians have told them really mean things. It was your fault you were abused. It was your fault that your mom doesn't want you because you don't know how to handle yourself. And so when they've heard that message, they are more mistrustful than anybody. And if I can gently forgive them and have them have a consequence, you don't get to talk to me like that. You aren't going to be in gym, or you're not going horseback riding this week. But you know what? Tomorrow we're going to start new, or this afternoon we're going to start new. And I've had my social worker come down and say, oh my goodness, I thought that girl was going to kill you this morning, and now you guys are just sitting there doing work. Yes, and that's what it is. If you can't forgive your students, you should not work with difficult ones, because you have to model forgiveness every day. And so this kind of comes back to the question, why culturally responsive? We need to take into account the home environments of our students when we're developing rules and systems we expect them to follow. And we have to be culturally sensitive and knowledgeable about those kids that we are teaching. If they aren't feeling connected, they will stop coming. I have two children myself at home. When I look at the culture inside my home and the culture of the schools they attend, there's really not much of a switch because I'm a teacher mom, So my kids walk into the school and they already have a great idea about the rules, about the level of volume you might use in a school, about what words are appropriate, what words you might be able to get away with in the lunchroom. I do have a high school kid, so he knows I better not hear certain language in the classroom, but I get that you're a teenager and you might being appropriate in the lunchroom, kids need to know where they can be a little bit freer, and then how free. For some of my kids, I had a young lady who I'm working on violence with. She fights all the time. She's very violent. She got off a bus the other day in town, and she was with her guardian, and a girl on the bus was giving her a dirty look. So as soon as they get off, she beat her butt. And I said, "Oh my goodness, what did your grandma do when you beat up the other girl?" Well, she was like, get it," and she was videotaping it so that they could post it later. So when I have family systems that promote violence and celebrate it, it's very challenging for me to then teach these children how to not use violence to solve their problems, or to help them funnel that kind of aggression into a different way. And I don't know if I can always break those cycles, because I have not always had success breaking that cycle of violence. In the school, though, I've been able to switch her, and she has not been suspended once this year. Yay! Um, and I've talked to Grandma. Like after that happened, I call Grandma, and she's a wonderful woman. We get along well. I think on my next slide. Nope, that's something else. But yes, and that's going to come in with rapport later. When I meet with families, it's very important that you contact them early and with something positive, especially when you're working with difficult students. They are used to, I work with teenagers, so those families, they see that number, they often have the school number blocked. They don't want to talk to school. They have had nothing but bad things with school. And when I can call them, and even if it's just that this young lady helped me bring all the lunches in today, and she was so appropriate and she was so great. That grandma, that was the first time anybody ever called home to tell her something good about her child. That is unfortunate, because everybody has something good about them. So when you have those that are more frequently suspended, those that push your buttons to the end of the earth, you have to really get in touch with that family early and talk to them and convince them that you're on the same team. This next slide talks about engaging lessons and teaching learning to other. There's an awesome link here on YouTube that I would encourage you to look at later. It's with Kevin Feldman. I went and I've attended a couple of his trainings, and everyone does everything. You think, you write, you read, you keep involved. Another quote from him is, "Learning is not a spectator sport." And he really helped me to rethink any downtime in the classroom. I don't really have downtime, and my students hate it sometimes, but that's that's what it is. If my lesson wraps up and there's 10 minutes before the end of the session, all right, everybody, take it out the door, let me pass out sticky notes, and I will just come up with something on the fly. Tell me one thing you learned, or refresh me with one vocabulary word we defined today. And then that is what they have to write on before they walk out and hand it to me. That's huge, because you lose behavior control when you don't have something engaging happening. And when I have given my kids academic vocabulary, because a lot of them, they aren't using academic vocabulary at home. They're not reading for pleasure at home. They're not really doing anything school related at home. So when I can give them one big word like vestigial structures, and we're going to talk about unnecessary parts of the body, and I might revisit that 2 or 3 days with them and give them some fun science words to talk about, they're going to feel smart, they're going to feel good about themselves, and then I'm going to encourage them to switch it into their writing and to encourage it in their speaking. And when I hear them use one of those big, fancy, cool grown-up words, I'm going to praise that, and we have nerd moments where we just celebrate that we are smart. Restorative justice, another great video. Restorative justice is not just an American thing. This is widely used over in the European countries, even with murderers. Like I've watched a video on restorative justice where the murderer sat down in a restorative circle with the victim's family. And it was amazing to watch the healing that could take place in this. If you can't tell, I have a theme on owning your behavior, talking directly about what was hurting, and healing and forgiving past it. Restorative justice fits that perfectly, because instead of just punishing and taking things away, the students are brought back together and they have to think about what they did and how it affected the other. And then the victim is right there explaining how it affected them. I had a young man at the high school who threw a pencil willy-nilly, and it whipped the lunch lady right in the head, and it really hurt her. He had no intention of hurting her. He just whipped it down to see, I don't know, what it would do. So I attended his restorative justice as his kind of sidekick and his support person. And, when he heard how much that scared her and how it caused her pain, his anonymity and his action was taken away. And when I remove the anonymity to my students, they have consciences. Everybody does. But when you feel anonymous in a group and you're cutting up, you become that mob mentality. And then boom, you're suspended, and yep, nobody there cared about me anyway, so I might as well just step on out. I like how restorative justice can happen in the day when something happened. Like, I've got two girls ready to fight. Boom, I'm going to call that restorative justice circle right now, and we're going to get to the bottom of it, and I'm going to prevent that violence before it happens. And if there's other girls who are involved in the drama and all the rumors, let's bring them all in and let's sit down and talk about it. This requires staff. I mean, this is not something you can just stop your classroom and do. So if your building structure is looking at something to help, I just highly recommend restorative justice. In my last job, I learned that each day out of school on suspension is a 1% increase in the possibility of dropping out. My last job before my EI block was running an alternative ed program for suspended and expelled kids that have disabilities. And I would have students that were suspended for 180 days because they did, a weapon or drugs or a big three, one of those huge offenses. If they're out for 180 days, that's a 180% chance that they are not going to graduate from high school. That was a challenge for me. And so I developed a system with my special ed director and the Lansing School District that we would then continue to serve these suspended and expelled students to ensure that they're getting their free and appropriate public education, but to try and get them still on track to graduate. In the 2.5 years I ran that program, I ended up issuing 76 different credits for the students in high school who came through. So they might not have been completely on track when they left me after a year of being kicked out, but they got 4 or 5 more credits that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So coming up with programs in your schools to capture back in those kids that are being suspended for multiple days is very important, especially for our students with disabilities. And I know in Lansing we have a higher percentage of students with disabilities than some of our neighboring districts in the same county, but we also serve very, culturally challenged students in poverty and at risk. Rapport. Not only do you need to be having that rapport with students, but with other staff. When I began working at Beekman this year, those of you who aren't familiar with the Lansing School District and what Beekman is a center-based school. So it's not a regular old high school. It is a school that goes from preschool all the way to age 26, and it typically houses students with very severe disabilities. The bulk of our students at Beekman are nonverbal. Over 50% of the students at the school I work at are nonverbal. Half of them are chair users and have multiple disabilities, and several are medically fragile students, and we have little ones there too. When my district decided to put the emotionally impaired block over at Beekman, a lot of those teachers that work with the medically fragile students were concerned. Emotionally impaired students typically have behavior problems. There's violence at times. They didn't really want that in their school, and I don't think you want to blame anybody for that. You want to control your world as much as you can and not have it interrupted by kids that don't have good control of their behavior. When I began working, I tried to figure out what teachers could I collaborate with. How do I get them to view my students in a different way? And how do I be genuinely a real colleague to them? And I was fortunate. I just have always had the blessings to work with really great people. And, the adult teacher for students in ages 20 to 26 that have cognitive impairments, they would partner with us and we would do healthy gym time so that my kids could get to play basketball with other able-bodied students and work on some of their social stuff. Some of my students didn't want to go talk to those kids that had more significant disabilities, and being at Beekman gave me a real cool rehabilitative factor because I was working on their compassion daily, and they were constantly seeing students that had more struggles academically and just with health issues that kind of gave them pause. If you go get shot tomorrow doing gangbang stuff, you could end up in a wheelchair. And when you see somebody as a chair user daily, it makes you realize that this could happen to you. Anything is liable to change. Now, my district, we have electronic grades. I'm sure most schools have this now. As a mother, I love it when my children's teachers will update those grades weekly. I would always update grades every week. I'm just old school that I give a update to the parents on Monday. So the week before, I've written down all of the kids' behaviors that week, and then I update their grades and I send it home every Monday with the student so that their families are aware of how they're doing. And I'm frequently calling families, and I'm calling ministers, and I'm calling deacon, and I'm calling CMH, and I'm calling their therapists, and anybody I can to get them in, because I might not be the one that they like the most. Who do they like the most? Who can I get in to help you figure out what you're going to do better and have better goals for yourself? And I've worked with several MSU interns over the years, and they want to sit and they want to imitate what I'm doing in the classroom, or maybe even sometimes imitate my word choice or my personality a bit. And I just would always say, you need to be you. Be yourself and laugh every day and just relax into things, and it will be amazing. And so my main message is that if you're out there working with difficult kids, you are a gift. And just thank you very much for what you do. And I'm sorry I didn't include some of my other lessons in this, but you can always email me if you want it, and I will definitely get those out to everybody. So I don't know if anybody else has any questions at this point, because this is kind of where I'm wrapping up. And I guess I'm shorter than I thought I'd be.
Great, thank you, Roz. You gave a lot of things to think about. So it looks like we've got a question that's coming in, and for those of you who are watching, Kara did put Roz's email address on there, rosalind.kuiper@lansingschools.net. So I've got a couple questions. So while other people are thinking out questions or typing, do you mind if I just ask you a few, Roz?
I don't mind.
Okay. So Kara had asked, how do you work with parents and guardians in those situations when you were talking earlier about kind of some of the pieces of working with systems outside of the school and things. But I'm curious about how can parents or other people in the student system, like maybe their principals or their ministers or people that are connected to the student some way, how can those people support someone like yourself in your work so that you're kind of saying the same thing and supporting the student in similar ways?
Right. I mean, I'm an open door person, so if you want to come into my classroom and be with your young person, I very much welcome that. I see Mary has that same kind of question about dealing with the parents. All of my relationships with parents have not been smooth. They're often on the defensive as soon as I contact them because their student has always been so volatile. So I will always try and make that first contact to say something positive. So in the first 3 weeks of school, I am going through my caseload, and I am making sure I have called a parent, each one of my parents once, to say something good about their kid, to introduce myself. I know a lot of teachers send home a newsletter. I will do that, but I will also make a personal contact through a phone call. And when I make that personal contact, I just want to first off ask the parent, I see that your child is having a hard time sitting still. I see that your child is using a lot of profanity in the classroom. What do you do at home that works? And I immediately turn them into the expert on their kid, and I reflectively listen. So as they're talking to me, instead of thinking, yeah, I've tried that. Yeah, oh, I tried that. That didn't work. I just say, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is this. And I take notes and I write it down. And I'm like, boy, and one sentence I say to every single parent I talk to: thank you for what you're doing at home. I'm a spiritual person. I know it doesn't necessarily need to be in my job. And most people have not been offended when I've said, I believe that God has made you this child's parent for a reason. And we are very blessed that we get to work together. And I'm hoping that I can do right by your family. And thank you for allowing me to experience this with you. So coming from a place where I'm not the expert and giving them that feeling that they're the expert of their own child, and I'm just going to be learning alongside with them, it takes some of the power out. I'm a white lady. I can't be anything but a white lady. A lot of the youth I work with are African American, and for some of my youth, they are in a completely different culture where they only are with other black folks. Their whole church is black, their families are black. They really don't have a lot of white people in their life. And so I've had moms tell me, you're just another well-intentioned white lady who's going to call CPS on me. And she sees me as another white woman teacher lady, and I have negative stereotypes being drawn out of her before I even open my mouth. And I have to work against who I am, and sometimes, and I just say, you're right. I am a white lady. I am not, in your church. I am not in your community. But if you'd like, I'd love to come visit. And I go to a church service, and I see that young person in a whole different light, because you know what? He's not cutting up in that church service. He's not disrespecting his elders. He is being a role model. I've seen him over there helping the little kids get ready for their school. And when I walk in, he's blushing a bit, and I say, wow, look at you. Look at you doing the right thing. And I meet the mom and I meet the minister. It is extra time outside of work. I will not lie. I take extra time outside of my job to go to a sport event or to go to a church if I'm invited. And then the trust I've earned in that moment paves the way for anything else I need from that family. Oh no, you listen to Miss Kuiper. You listen to Miss Kuiper because I know that she's working for you. If you can just convince families that you have the best interest of their child, which you do. I mean, that's the whole reason we teach, right? I care very much about these kids. I tell my students every year, I believe we were put together for a reason, and that we have a cool journey ahead of us. We're all going to come out stronger. We're all going to come out wiser. I've sat and cried with families as they try and figure out the mental health of a child, and they have to maybe go do inpatient treatment again. I've had to call CPS and find out a family knows it was me who called, and have them attack me verbally and tell me I'm the worst person in the world. And then I get through that. And at the end of the school year, thank you. Please don't quit your job. I really hope you're here next year. It is worth it. It's just a lot of forgiveness and a lot of humility, because I am not better than any of these families that I'm working with. And as soon as I think I'm better, I should leave, because that's not going to, in my way of thinking, that's not how you live a life of service, and that's not how you really work with people. You need to humble yourself and know that we're all doing the best thing, what works for each individual.
Wow, I think you're one of my heroes now, Rosaline.
Oh, stop.
I don't want to. I want to read Dave H's comment and see what your response to this is. So he writes. He also, first of all, he says thanks for what you do, but then he says, our big challenge has been teachers who don't appreciate the challenges of a difficult student. They feel they can handle it. So what would you say to him with that comment?
Well, they're an ego-driven person, and that's what they're going to view. And my son has had difficult teachers, and I just say this is life experience. You know, we're going to get through this year with this individual. And as a parent with a difficult student, I would be educating my teachers. I would say start with the counselor. Ask the counselor to bring in a family meeting. My son is a 504 plan kid because he's got anxiety issues. But if you already have a kid that has a label, whether it's on a 504 or an IEP, make sure you're having an annual meeting, if not every marking period or every semester, to just tell that teacher this is what works. And if you just let Johnny have the time to do his test down in the counseling office, or when you see him pop, like I can see a kid starting to pop before they pop. And that just is years of practice. I can see the irritation in their body language, and they might not even know they're about to pop. And I can just calmly touch a shoulder and say, you know what, will you please do me a big favor? And will you please take this next door to such and such a teacher's room? And I just write a stupid note that says, hey, Kristen, I needed to get this one out for a minute. Linger, get them settled, send them back. You have to have partnerships. So I staple that shut, and I give him a very important job to distract wherever his mind was going and shoot him over. And my friend might read it and giggle and then talk to the kid for a second and then send him back. And when he comes back in, thank you so much. My gosh, I'm glad you're here today. I can't do this gig without you. Are you ready? Are you ready to learn now? And if I feel like they're better, okay, let's do this. And if not, then I'm going to send them with another staff to do something else. I don't think a lot of teachers are doing enough to curb something before it happens. You can typically see something is bubbling, and instead of ignoring it, you need to figure out how that kid is going to do it. And the race relations, Mary, it's huge. It's very huge. And I find that the only way to deal with it is to be extremely, I don't know if it's rude, I mean, just to point it right out. You just have to point it right out. I had a young lady who I loved. Oh my goodness, I love this girl. She's like 28 now. And I got really involved with her, and her family came to my home. I offered to do her baby shower at my home. And I'm the only white person there. And they all come in, and everybody's being very quiet, and it's very uncomfortable. And it felt kind of like those parent-teacher conferences where you just can tell that family's not comfortable. And I just said, I know you're in the white lady's house, but I know you're a lot more fun than this, so can we just kind of relax and enjoy ourselves? And after explicitly drawing out their differences and laughing about it a little, they all kind of relaxed, and we had a wonderful gathering, and I built more trust, and we came together because we're all raising babies. We're all working. We're all in the same American dream as we are. And I teach American literature almost every year. And I always, in the last decade, as I've challenged kids, is the American dream still here? Do we still have a unified American dream? I have been so disheartened to realize that people don't believe it. They just don't believe we have an American dream. Did I lose you, Dave?
Nope, I'm here.
Okay, because my screen went blank, so now I can't see.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you
That's
probably
okay.
timed out. That's all right. You're good. I will read the questions out to you. So thank you for letting me know that. So if anything else that comes in, I will read it to you.
Okay.
So I don't know if you missed this, but Dave H. said, you're exactly right. You need intervention before things spiral out of control. And Kara wrote, you said it perfectly before, you have to remain humble. But as you were talking, it ran right into the next question that I had for you, so I'm just going to ask it. So what advice can you give, or examples that you might be able to give to your colleagues in non-EI classrooms about how to assess risks for things like violence and how to de-escalate situations? So you talked about restorative justice before, but how could a teacher in a non-EI classroom, how can they incorporate some of these things when they've got, like 30 kids and most of them are doing just fine?
Right. And I would still bring up that equitable versus equal. The kids in the room know who who Johnny is. We're just going to say Johnny. Everybody knows who Johnny is because Johnny taxes the teacher. Johnny is requiring a lot of support, and using them as an ally and say, you're going to see that I might do something different for him, but it's going to be for the best of all of us. It's for the good of all. Everybody's going to benefit if we can support him in this way. So you, my friend, when he's, if you have a couple honors kids or just really good social kids, they don't have to be academically amazing, but maybe they have that high social intelligence. Have them sit next to Johnny, and you low key, without Johnny even knowing, when you see him getting off task on notes, would you want to try and encourage them? My kids do better when peers are encouraging of one another instead of encouraging the wrong behavior. If I have a kid starting to pop off in my classroom and getting all inappropriate and getting all loud and, trying to do that attention-seeking thing and look around the room and see who's responding, I'll just, with my mean mom voice, I don't want you to respond to his behavior. This is going to help me if you guys continue on with what I expect right now. I might not be able to get him out of the room right away, and if he refuses to come out of the room with me, then what I'll say, would everybody please pick up your books, and we're going to walk out to the hallway, and he's going to stay right there. Because it's a power struggle. So I take away your power. You refuse to go where I want you to go, then I'm going to take the rest of the kids and we're going to go for a walk, and you can have the room. You don't have the power anymore. I'm in charge. It is harder to do that with 30 kids, but you could take them down to the library or whatever and leave the Yahoo in the room for a minute until public safety or the social worker can come take them. That's definitely an EI behavior management tool. Instead of removing the offender, I will remove everybody else. And that throws them off. They don't know what to do. When you take away an audience, 90% of misbehavior stops. So if I want to discipline a kid too, and you're going to discipline that kid in a room full of 30 kids, you're not going to discipline that kid in front of 30 kids. You're going to talk really quietly just to him, or ask him to just step out in the hallway where you've got that one-on-one attention. Do not engage in posturing in front of the other students. Do not raise your voice. When I'm really mad, because I start whispering and I get really close to you and I'm talking only to you because they want the audience. My kids live off of the excitement. It's like a Jerry Springer show. How can we bring Jerry Springer live here to the classroom? And my job is to eliminate any of that feel, period, and to have each person be accountable for their own behavior.
Great. Do you mind if I put my therapist hat on for just a second and ask you a question as a counselor?
Sure.
So, personality disorders aren't diagnosable until after age 18, but we know that trauma and stressor-related disorders like reactive attachment disorder, for example, often can lead to things like antisocial disorder or psychotic episodes. So when you have a kid like this, how do you incorporate them into things like circles or even restorative justice when often they struggle with just understanding the basic concept of empathy? How do you maintain a classroom when you've got a kid like that?
And I have a few that have a very hard time with empathy, very histrionic, ego, centered, narcissistic. It's hard for me to get them silent enough to hear their peer. But it's just that steady work. And when a moment comes up where they actually do show empathy or compassion towards something, I praise it. We talk about it and say, look at how you were able to take on that other person's feelings. That's huge, because I have several schizophrenics too who are just not in touch with reality, period. And then I have a couple kids who I'm seeing antisocial personality disorders in. And a lot of it is poor attachments as children. They didn't have stable parenting figures. They've been put in foster care and different relatives have been taking care of them. I cannot undo that attachment, nor can I foster an enabling attachment with me. That's been years of practice where I can love you and care about you without becoming codependent. It's really in the last 5 years I have been better at those types of boundaries. I still have my really fluid boundaries, and I'm working with families outside of the school quite a bit and connecting with them, because that's the only thing that I can do to make them trust me. And then, when you've taught for a while, you get street credit. Oh, you're Kuiper. Oh, yeah, my cousin told me I better be good or he's going to hit me. Oh, yay, who's your cousin? Awesome. And so building those relationships prior to Johnny walking in the door, Johnny already heard about me through his big cousin, and if he gives me any grief, all I got to do is send his cousin a message, and he will go have a conversation with him. If you have kids with CMH, you need to be talking to that counselor daily. And if you need to get your social worker or somebody in the classroom to do a running tally of the disturbing behaviors and then problem solve with that family, because we can't recommend meds. It's against the law for me to tell a family that you need to medicate your child. But the truth is, some of our students will do better on meds, and that's a personal family decision. So if they need us to do some running records and to give them observation notes to give to those doctors, I'm all for that, and just letting them know we're here to support your personal decision about medication for your child. But when I'm working, when I have some of my EI kids who have such personality disorders, and I go call grandma in, and grandma's got the same personality disorder, I'm working in a family system that's unhealthy. And can I change the way that family dances, that family interacts? I don't know, but I can change the way I interact with the young girl, and I can try giving her new language. And when grandma does these manipulative statements to her, I can give her new words or a new way of behaving to try and switch up the script. It's very hard to unlearn poor ways of behaving with one another.
You definitely have the heart of a saint. So thank you for your work. I'm just going to have one more question. So Kara asked, she said, there's such a stigma against students with emotional and physical disabilities. Have you seen ways that schools as a whole are taking measures to correct that mindset?
Yes. At Eastern High School, they did a links program, and not only would that assign a junior or senior student to a freshman student, but as a special ed teacher, I could then, maybe I have a 10th or 11th grade student who's got some emotional issues, and it's going to be really great if I connect them to a link to an older upperclassman. And then the school would develop the system where those older, maybe even kids who want to go into education, these senior students, they are facilitating relationships with a younger student or a student with more of a disability. Project Unify is a huge thing that goes on throughout our country, and that takes non-disabled peers and they partner with students that are in Special Olympics. Now, emotionally impaired kids, they don't qualify for Special Olympics because it's based on your disability status. You have to have a cognitive impairment. So my EI kids, they don't get into Project Unify because that's not who they are. And then there's not a lot of typical things in a school building to pick them out. Most often they're put back by the wood shop in a block room like mine and hope they don't come out. But the whole point is for me to help them to get ready to go out. So I'll find like that one really juicy subject. They just love history or they just love science. And that's the class I'm going to put them in, that general ed. And I'm going to handpick my teacher. I'm going to really try and find a teacher who I know is patient and will really read this behavior plan I give you and at least go through these first 3 interventions. If he does this, don't say his name. You just touch the corner of his desk and you just give him a look. Make sure he gives you the eye contact. That's your nonverbal warning. Nobody else in the whole room is even going to know it. You're just going to touch his desk and you're going to make eye contact. That's his first warning. The rest of the room should be oblivious. Then he keeps it up, and then you come back near him and you crouch. You get low, like bend your knees down at the side of his table, and now you're going to say a word. I need you to stop. And then you walk away. And then you're going to look at his peers around him and say, I really like it when you stay on task and you're doing what I need. Thank you so much. Or, hey, how about Robbie? Why don't you come sit over here? Johnny needs a moment. And I'm going to move somebody away from him into another group. And then when I see him settling, great. Let me bring Robbie back. Now you two are going to work on this, and I want to hear academic language. If I don't hear academic language, then I'm going to have to take you out. So, I mean, it's always got to be integral little steps, and the kid needs to know what those things are. You know, my students know if I touch your shoulder, this is part one. If I get down next to you low and I'm looking at you and I say a word, that's part two. As soon as I've asked you now to step out of the room, we're at part three, and you're not earning your way back in until you do a think sheet for me. And they have to sit down and they need to write what did they do to cause them to be put out of the room, how are they going to change it, and then it's a pain in your butt. Nobody wants to go out and write it. So they, at that second one, they're like, okay, I better just like get it together or I'm going to have to do more work. So those things can be used even in the general ed room.
Great. Classic behavioralism, right? And work in the classroom. I love it.
Exactly.
So we are out of our time now. I want to give you a couple seconds to wrap up if you have any other closing thoughts. For those of you that have further questions or would like to dialogue or connect with Rosaline, we do have her email address in there. Kara, go ahead and put that in there one more time. And so, Ros, do you have any other final thoughts for us that you'd like to close with?
I just want to thank you so much for asking me to come in and do this. This is the first little webinar thing I've ever done, and it's been kind of cool. I have more ideas for if I were to present again about the same subject and some more things I could share with folks. If teachers are on here looking at stuff, thank you so much for choosing this and for what you do. And for parents, thank you for trusting us to take care of your kids, and hopefully we will do right by you. I just appreciate the opportunity, so thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rosalind. This is a really good topic. Great information, and I think this will go far. So I want to remind you that our people that are listening, that this is not the only chance to interact with this content. We do record all of our webinars. You can find all of these at www.spartanshelpingspartans.com. And we're constantly building programs for you. So the MSU Alumni Lens, in fact, exists to build a portfolio of professionally and personally enriching content and experiences for Spartans around the globe. So we are always looking for ideas. We're always looking for content. We're looking for people who want to contribute to the content and to this portfolio that we're building. So if you have ideas, please email me, isbeld@msu.edu, or you can send Lisa Parker your thoughts or ideas, lisap@msu.edu. Seriously, we really want to hear from you. So thank you very much for being here with us today, and hopefully we'll bump into all of you at some other point in time in the future. Go green.
Oh.